go. All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Mastering Tall Tales. This is going to be an interesting evening. A little background on Tall Tales and District 44. So, the way that Tall Tales came about to be in our district is that the District Executive Council, which is made up of all of the area directors, all the division directors, and the senior 7 officers, right at the start of the Toastmasters year for District 44, we have a meeting and we decide what other speech contest are we going to run in addition to the international speech contest. There's a vote. And so everybody voted to do Tall Tales. We loved innovation. We wanted to do new things. And Tall Tales is a brand new contest for District 44. Never been run before in our district. It did happen years ago when everybody in District 44 was a part of District 14, but that was more than 10 years ago. So that's how Tall Tales showed up. Well, immediately on the heels of that vote occurring, the question was, this is wonderful. What is a tall tale and how do you do it and how do you judge it and how long is it and 1,000 other questions. So it was immediately apparent that we needed to have some education on exactly what Tall Tales was. So when you or your club members or your contestants are getting up on stage, you know what a Tall Tales looks like, you know how to do it well, you feel like you've got a grasp of it and you can really do it well. Further, judges know what to look for in terms of figuring out whether or not a speech qualifies as Tall Tales, whether it's a good tale or not. And that's what brought us here tonight. So I want to introduce our presenter for the evening. His name is David Doerrier. David is a seasoned Toastmaster, and by seasoned, I mean like 30 years in being a Toastmaster. So he certainly has given a tremendous number of presentations. David, in his outside Toastmasters life, is a trainer. He trains trainers on how to train. That is his specialty. So he's done a bunch of research into what constitutes Tall Tales, put together the session for us tonight. If you haven't heard David speak yet, as soon as he opens his mouth, you're going to hear his career as a radio DJ. So without further ado, I want to introduce everybody to David Doerrier, offering for us mastery on Tall Tales. David, over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Chad, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you for being a part of today's festivities. One thing that Chad left out of here was also how did I draw the short straw, or to be lucky enough to present this to you. Well, we had a gentleman in our club who wanted to give did give a Tall Tales speech, and I volunteered to be the evaluator. This was my first exposure to Tall Tales. So I downloaded from Mother Toastmaster the evaluation form. And I started seeing some very different wording on this evaluation form than I've ever seen before. And it caused me to give a very different type of an evaluation to Terry. So that led to me wanting to explore a little bit more about Tall Tales. How do you do a Tall Tales? How do you tell a Tall Tales and present it effectively? So that's why we're here today, and I'm very happy to be able to present this to you. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And move you. This is that awkward period of getting things set up. And I should also say I've got 4 screens here. The one behind me makes number 4. All righty. We've got a good crowd today. So today's all about Tall Tales, making it simple, a beginner's guide. There we go. So what are Tall Tales? Think about your childhood and think about the movies that you've seen. So what are some, let's start off by defining what Tall Tales are. So in the chat or raise your hand, what are some examples of Tall Tales? Some books. Let's just stick with the books for now. We'll get to the movies in just a moment. But what are some books that you recall from your childhood or even recently? Go
Jack and
ahead.
the Beanstalk.
Jack and the Beanstalk. So there's definitely books and movies about Jack and the Beanstalk. Harry Potter is another good example.
Tortoise and the Hare.
A Tortoise and the Hare. So a lot of good examples. So
Princess
here's
and the
some
Pea.
good. Yes, yes. So many. Here are some additional ones on the screen. Paul Bunyan, Pecos Bill. Do you recall him? Pecos Bill he's riding a hurricane. Is that what or a tornado? Uh, One that I remember as a kid was Johnny Appleseed. The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. That's another one that I remember seeing that at school, the cartoon version of that, the Disney version of that, and it just scared me to death. The headless horseman, Davy Crockett, and Bear Rabbit. Can you think of any additional ones that we haven't already said or that aren't on this list?
David from the chat, we've got a couple, Humpty Dumpty, and one of my favorites, The Legend of John Henry.
All excellent books. So, what is it about these stories that make them a tall tale? Or what are some of the things about these stories that stand out to you?
Oh,
What are some of the,
Elaine, I see
go
you
ahead.
with your hand raised. Why don't you go ahead?
Think,
Many times they will have a story behind them
yeah, a
or a
story,
lesson, a lesson.
right? A lesson to be learned. Exactly. Winnie the Pooh, a good story. Exaggerations, fantabulous, very good. The vision created. The vision created. Lana. So we're going to talk more about that vision created in just a moment. But continuing with tall tales, now let's look at movies. I'm giving one away here on the screen. What are some movies that would fall into tall tales?
Wizard of Oz.
Wizard of Oz, great. Any
Judy said
additional?
the big fish.
Big Fish, yeah, Big Fish, yes. The Jungle Book, Game of Thrones, okay, yeah, Game of Thrones, The
Oh,
Matrix,
Would
okay.
we consider Dora the Explorer or Finding Dory, I guess? Would that be one?
Well, that's a great question. Let's put that out to the group. Dora the Explorer, or what did you say? Finding Dora?
I called it wrong. It's called Finding Dory.
Finding Dory. What about the what was the fish that was the with Disney with Ellen DeGeneres was the voice?
Nemo.
Nemo, yeah.
Nemo.
Yeah, could that be Finding Nemo? Those as well. I don't know if I'm an expert enough to determine what is and what isn't, but certainly you get into that fairy tale, you get into that bigger than life. Fish are talking. Fish are being able to travel, to jump out of fish tanks, to flush themselves down the toilet, find the right tubing to get them all the way back to finding the rest of their family. So certainly there's a bit of exaggeration in there, whether it's a tall tale or not. I'm not the professional there. Harlem Nights, Scooby Doo. So lots of great examples of films. Here's some others. I think someone said Big Fish, Baron Munchausen or something like that. I remember
Munchausen.
hearing the Munchausen. Jack the Giant Slayer. You also have Jack and the Beanstalk is made into a movie as well as books. The Sandlot. Now, the thing that I researched about The Sandlot, it may not necessarily be a tall tale, but there's a portion. Do you recall in the movie The Sandlot that there's a portion of this that is kind of a tall tale built in the middle of it? Do you recall what that is?
About the dog?
About the dog. About the dog is just this giant, bigger than life thing. The dog is taking all the baseballs, and it's a giant monster. So that's kind of a tall tale that's built into the movie. Willy Wonka, James and the Giant Peach. So all of these are good examples, and one way of uh, of practicing or rehearsing or preparing for tall tales would be to go ahead and watch some of these movies, read some of these books, and then take away the lesson from each of them, as well as looking at how they're structuring these different stories. So I would recommend watching these and reading the books. So what is our objective today? Today is all about starting to scratch the surface on how to start crafting that tall tale speech. And we're going to look at how to develop the ideas around it. And the third piece is how to create that impactful ending. So I want to start off here with, what questions did you come here with today? What was it about the information that went out to the group today, or that went out to District 44? What was it that said, hey, you know something? I've got to come here and be a part of this Wednesday evening workshop at 7 o'clock. What's motivating you to be here today? And you can put that into the chat or raise your hand if you'd like, and let me know what's your what motivated you enough to show up. I know what motivated me was to be here with all of you today, and it forced me to have to learn a lot about the tall tales. Find out about the judging criteria. We're definitely going to go through that. The ability to learn, helping my clubs to understand a tall tale. Good, I like that. Don't even know where to begin to create a story. We're going to go through that as well. Anne, what more information about how to craft a story? So a story for a tall tale is going to be very similar to how you would craft any story. Like all stories, there's a beginning that's got to capture your audience's attention. There's also a middle portion of the story, and then there's some sort of a conclusion. Now that's going to be standard in all stories, but here we're going to specifically look at, how do you go about designing this to be a tall tale? Who can compete? Who is eligible? Club members. Oh, that's a great question, Sherry. So let's go ahead and address that right now, because I don't have this in my presentation, Chad. So who is eligible to compete? And let's also look at, Chad, what levels will people be competing at?
Great question. Thank you. So in a tall tales competition, the qualifications in order to compete are the same as for humorous and evaluation. Any contestant must be a paid Toastmaster member, and they must be from a club in good standing. So what is a club in good standing? That's a club that has at least 8 renewed members. So renewals are happening right now. This is a great reason to renew your membership, not only so you can compete, but also so that anybody from your club can compete. If you've got a club that has less than 8 members who have renewed as of October 1st, that club would not yet be in good standing, and you need to go and shake the tree a little bit and get a few more members to renew so you can get above that 8 mark. Now, for the folks that are competing at the club and they win, they can go on. They're going to go on to area. The folks who win at area go on to division. The folks who win at division go on to district. For tall tales, the district level is the terminal level. You do not rise any higher than that at the district level. But anyone who enters has the possibility to become the District 44 champion of the Tall Tales competition. The only speech competition that goes beyond the district level, by the way, is the international speech competition. But Tall Tales ends at the district.
Yeah. So one question on that: is there any sort of requirement that they have a certain amount of pathways completed as well?
No, there is no requirement for that. So long as you're a paid member and you're from a club in good standing, you're good. If you want to do international, that's when you've got to do levels 1 and 2 in any path, or have completed the Competent Communicators Manual if you've been around that long.
Okay. No. Yep. One question from Kim, where will this be? So if the question is, where will the finals be with the district? It will be at the district conference next year, 2025. As far as the club is going to happen in your club, the area, not sure where that will happen yet. Oh, all of this be in person?
Good question. So this year, area, division, and district competitions must be in person only, no hybrid, right? And no Zoom, no virtual, has to be in person. The club, however, has more options. So at the club level, if you want to run a virtual contest on Zoom, or you want to run a hybrid contest or an in-person contest, you have the flexibility to do that. But once you reach area, division, and district, then it switches to in-person only.
Yeah. So we're going to get to that question, Judy. How does tall tales differ from humorous? I can tell you in one way that they're both have different timings. And we'll get to that in just a minute when we start looking at the judging. So good stuff. Any additional questions? We're going to get to understanding the concept of tall tales. My husband says I can't lie. I said that's why it's a tall tale. Okay, first time VPE, want more information about how to craft a story. Okay, we're going to get into that. That's all good, great stuff. What I'm going to go back to is sharing my screen again. And let's make sure, one of the ground rules is making sure that your audio is always muted unless you are actively talking or participating in this to help with that, any background noise. And Chad, if you could help me with that at times. What I would like to get into here is to demonstrate a tall tale. This is wherever District 42 in their fall conference, and I'm not quite sure what year. But what I'd like to do is have you observe it as an evaluator. And when we come back on the other side of this video, I'd like to hear your thoughts on what were your takeaways from this. Okay? And please give me a thumbs up if you can hear it. All right. And I see what's going on. I apologize.
You've got to hand it to me, Neil Lightfelt.
You may notice that I have very expressive hands. There's a reason for that. It is because I am a professional hand actor. When a movie scene calls for a dynamic and yet nuanced hand performance, I am the go-to guy in the movie business. The lead actor might have tremendous talent, but he may not have the critical skills to pull off a memorable hand performance. Perfect example. Do you remember Robert De Niro in the movie Taxi Driver, where he portrays Travis Bickle, a disaffected taxi driver? Do you remember that iconic scene where he's talking to himself in the mirror? What, you talking to me? You talking to me? And then he pulls his gun, points it in the mirror, the camera zooms in, and in that moment, that hand expressed all of the anger, the frustration, and ultimately the madness of Travis Bickle. That was my hand. I lost 30 pounds to prepare for that role. I remember after that movie wrapped, I was sitting talking with Bobby, and his friends call him Bobby. We were sharing a bowl of rigatoni, and he said to me, "Neil, you are hands down the best hand actor in the business." That was the greatest compliment that was ever handed to me. Another example, Jack Nicholson in the movie A Few Good Men, where he portrays a Marine colonel. Do you remember that classic scene where he's being cross-examined by Tom Cruise, and the camera continues to cut to his hand on the side of the witness stand, drumming, until finally he grabs the side of the witness stand and squeezes tighter and tighter until finally he explodes. "You can't handle the truth!" My hand. I went through Marine basic training 3 times in order to understand the military hand. I remember Jack and I had a little falling out when that movie first came out. The reviews started coming in, and all the critics could talk about was that amazing hand performance. I remember one headline, "It's time for a hand category at the Oscars." Well, Jack's people didn't like that. They got on the phone, started calling all the newspapers and magazines. Next thing you know, all the reviews are about Jack's intense performance. Now, I love Jack, dear friend, great actor. But I just thought that was a little underhanded. Right? Now, I have worked with presidents as well. If you remember the presidential swearing in almost 4 years ago, do you remember the close-up of Obama's hand on the Bible? Of course, the makeup people did a tremendous job making that believable. But it was a very difficult shot. I had to hide behind Michelle Obama in order to stay out of the camera frame. And Michelle was right here, if you know what I mean. And I had to reach around in order to position my hand. Very difficult shot, very. Well, Robert De Niro, Jack Nicholson, the Obamas, I could go on for hours, but my time is up. But you have been a tremendous audience. Please give yourselves a hand.
All righty. So as looking at it as an evaluator, what are you taking away from that? That I feel is a great example, San Fernando Valley, District 52. Thank you. What do you take away from that? What stood out to you?
The gestures.
The gestures. Okay. And why the gestures? Why were they important? Why did they stand out?
Because it was all about the hands. It was, and he used them quite expressively.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Very good. Yeah. Great use of body language. Chad, a lot of stuff coming in. Any of those responses in the chat stand out?
You bet. So we've got tons. Excellent use of pauses with humor. This one, I think, gets at something you may talk about later, the sarcasm. Another one, building up the story with a constant theme, elevating the examples every time. Keeping the story consistent with a good through line and focusing, of course, on the hand.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. creativity. So these are the things that we're going to start looking at on giving you some time to start creating your presentation. So let's first take a look at the definition of tall tales. There you go. Trying to get you moved. All right, definition of tall tales. Many of the things that you all said already. Funny, exaggerated, starts with something normal, and just quickly, well, I wouldn't say quickly escalates from there, but certainly is going to escalate. We're going to talk more about that opening in just a moment of how to build up to it. You don't want to give it away too fast. So that's the definition of a tall tales, and I think the gentleman that we just watched did a very good job of exaggerating with the hands and the body language, starting with something normal and just going on from there. One of the questions that came up in the chat was about the rules, and that's what we're going to go through now. That's what we're going to take a look at. And this here comes from the rule book, Toastmasters rule book, their guidebook on all of the different contests. And there's just a very short blurb in there about the tall tales, and this is basically, well, the 3 to 5. It didn't even say that. I had to get that from somewhere else. But this speech is 3 to 5 minutes, a little bit longer than an impromptu speech and a little shorter than the someone asked earlier, what is the difference between this and a humorous speech? One difference is the time. Humorous speech would be 5 to 7 minutes. But certainly you can incorporate many of the same things that are in a tall tale and humorous. There's certainly a lot of comedy in both of them, a humor in both of them. So technically, what's the difference? I don't know. Maybe someone in this audience can tell me technically what is the difference between a humorous and a tall tale. Chad?
You bet. Thank you. So one of the differences is that even though both are thematic, meaning it has to have a theme of beginning, a middle, and end, both are funny. The tall tales on the other hand needs to be highly exaggerated, needs to be a very improbable kind of story. A humorous story can be believable. Yes, I could see that happening. It's plausible.
Mm-hmm.
With tall tales, though, much of the humor comes from the improbable nature of it, the exaggeration. That's one of the main differences that I see, David.
Yes. I thank you. I'm glad you explained that. That certainly makes sense. Yes. And I think the biggest is, and we're going to get into this, some of the things that are coming directly off of the judge's sheet. Let's get into that. And this is where you start seeing some of those differences that you just talked about, Chad. And the first is here, this coming directly off the judge's ballot of, like all speeches, they all need an opening, but here it's specifically looking for an opening that then has some sort of a buildup that eventually gets to an ending, a climax of some sort. There's organization, and there's also what's called smoothness. Any idea what they mean by smoothness? And this is not. I mean, if you know, Chad, this is for everybody else. But any idea what smoothness means? No wrong answers here. Transition, good. Elaine, very good. Transitions. Directly from the judge's ballot, smoothly builds up to a climax and a conclusion. A good tall tale speech immediately engages the audience's attention and then smoothly transitions. Connectedness. Very good, Barb. All of those would be an excellent way of describing smoothness. I think all stories have to have this, but here I think what's different is that I think all of them build, but I think we're going to get to some of the differences here on this next slide. Some of the very specific differences. effective use, and we've seen this, that effective use of exaggeration. And we're going to have an opportunity to put this together in just a few moments. Irony. You know, when I first was reading that on the judge's ballot when I was giving Terry an evaluation, I looked at irony and I'm thinking to myself, I don't have any examples of irony. Well, it was ironic that the next day, a situation happened to me that was very ironic. And that was I was driving around a part of Atlanta, very old part of Atlanta, where the streets are very narrow. And I was not used to driving in that part of town. So I was driving a little slower than normal. And a car behind me was a little impatient, and they were beeping on the horn. And finally, we got to a place where he could pass me. Well, as he passed me, I saw on the back he had one of those yellow stickers on it that said, "Please be patient, new driver." So there's an example of irony. What about you? Do you have some examples of irony, a pun as well? Do you have an example of irony? District 52. Oh, okay. So you shared the YouTube video. Very good. Share the link to the Tall Tales we just watched. Very good. So these are some of the things that are specifically pointed out on the judge's ballot that the judges are looking for. They're looking for the irony, the pun, the surprise twists, the humor, slapstick as well. These are specific words that are right on that ballot. And I'm not sure what the humorous ballot, if some of these words are on there. The other things that the judges are looking for is what you would expect in any speech. Your physical appearance, the way that you handle the stage, your confidence on stage, your ability to project your voice and to take command of the stage. Can you tell us the percentages? Yes, what I would recommend, I don't have the percentages here, but what I would recommend, because the percentages are what percent of physical goes towards your 100% or your 100 score, and voice, how much of that. I'd recommend downloading, doing a Google search for Toastmasters Tall Tales judging ballot, and go ahead and download that yourself, as I wasn't prepared with all those different percentages. Some additional things that the judges are looking at is that appropriateness to speech and purpose and audience. If I was to give any sort of evaluation or any sort of tip to the gentleman we saw, again, fantastic job. I think the one thing that could have been enhanced was the takeaway, the learning from this, that he did have that pun at the end. Give yourselves a hand. He had that pun at the end, but was there a lesson to be learned in all of this? Again, excellent job, but that's another thing that the judges are looking for, is, are there lessons to be learned? Also, word selection. Looking for unique, funny sounding words and I just don't happen to have any examples now. Like a funny word would be, well, I guess I put my luggage, the last time I saw my luggage is when I turned it in at the check-in desk at the airport. The next thing I heard, it was having a vacation on Guam. You know, Guam being a funny word. So using those funny words, and also at times finding opportunities to over pronunciate words, to give more emphasis to those words, those pronunciations. You know, now when it comes to good grammar, I've got mixed feelings about this, because I feel that depending on the story, you could have you know, that New York talk or the Boston talk or other type of dialect or something. I feel as long as it's consistent, you're able to understand the individual. Now, this is my 2 cents on it. I'm not a judge, but it says good grammar. But I think that if the grammar is appropriate to the story, to me, that's fine. But, you know, who am I? I'm just a guy teaching a class. So again, key ingredients that are important for a tall tale, taking that normal, taking that everyday mundane thing, and then just building and building and building on it till it has the climax. That's the Toastmasters word that they're using, till it gets to a conclusion of some sort. That humorous twist, that punchline at the end. What do you take away from this? So let me stop here for a moment and see, what questions do you have? Okay, I see that Sherry, thank you. You put the link for the Tall Tales Contest Judges Guide in the chat. Thank you for that. Do we need different tall tales on each level? Okay, that's a great question. Now, let me give you my 2 cents on it. I don't think so, because there's going to be different judges at each level. You'll be competing against different people at each level. But Chad, do we need different tall tales, a different speech at each level?
Great question. It is not required. You can do that if you like. You can write a different speech for every level. That's totally fine. But you don't have to do that. There's nothing in the rule book that states that you've got to give a different tall tales every time you go to a new competitive level. Similar to humorous, most competitors will keep the same speech throughout all their levels. So I'd stick with the same one. If I were you, you can perfect it as you go. If you want to go the extra mile and write a different one, you're free to do that too.
Okay. So this question here, does it need to have speech value like humorous international? It doesn't say in the judge's ballot.
You know what? That is an excellent question. I know we have another expert at speeches here in the room, Fran Ellis. Fran, I'm not sure if it needs to comport with that rule or not. I don't think so. What's your opinion?
Well, there's a word selection here that I'm going to ask to be clarified. When you're talking about speech value, are you talking about the purpose of it? And it does have to meet the speech purpose and the appropriateness to the audience and the situation. But as far as value in terms of, it has to be a well-constructed speech. I would say that value is very similar to purpose in this case. So if the purpose is to entertain with a tale that is outrageous, sarcastic, ironic, has surprise twist and humor, then it would serve its purpose.
Right.
Does
Thank
that
you,
answer
Fran.
the question? Who gave that? Who asked for that?
That was
did that.
Lena.
My
Lena.
question was that because, like, for instance, international and humorous, you need to have a speech value for the audience. It's like what David say, a lesson, take-home lesson that the audience can have. But in this tall tale, it doesn't have that category. So we just brag about something that doesn't have any meaning. Is that okay? How is the judge going to judge? That's the question.
Yeah.
Are they expecting us to have this take-home lesson that is valuable to the audience?
Yeah.
I don't
So,
think it's valuable to the audience. I'm going to say it's valuable to the type of speech that it is. Is it entertaining? Does it make you feel like this is kind of possible, but maybe not so much if you think about it really hard?
okay. I see Elaine has her hand up.
Okay.
You're on mute. Somebody owes me another
I
nickel.
had put a comment in to ask this question, which is, does there need to be any truth in the speech? It is a tall tale after all.
Right. Yeah. No, doesn't have to be any, but you can certainly start with something mundane like I took out the trash. That's yeah. I went to the dentist. I went to school. I drove to work, and then it just takes off from there. Right. Good questions. So we're looking at the Yanni. You have a. I hope I said your name correctly. You had your hand up. Nope. All right. So one of the questions, or one
I
of the
do,
things
sorry,
that.
David. Did
Go
not
ahead.
have the unmute quick enough. So I just put this presentation together for my clubs and my the club that I was mentoring for, and then was able to take down the judging criteria back to Lina's question about speech value. That one is very, we all know, is emphasized on international speech contest judging criteria. However, on the tall tale contest, that speech value is not part of the judging criteria, judging ballot.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that like all speeches should have some sort of impact on your audience, and being able to have something relevant, and even though a takeaway is not something that's being judged here, it's going to make an impact. I would feel that that would make an impact on your audience when there is some sort of a call to action, and now your audience is emotionally engaged with that. And I see admin manager. I apologize. I don't know your first name.
That's okay, David. It's fine. Sometimes I don't know my own name as well. I would just admit with the tall tales criteria, sort of kind of answering the question. The first criteria is content, and it talks about putting your speech together so people can understand it. For me, that is leaning towards a speech purpose. Are you saying something that the audience can understand and that engages the audience? So not getting so caught up in the word speech value, but what is the actual content of the speech and what is the impact to the audience? Then also in the language criteria, it talks about, is your language appropriate towards the message you're trying to share? So I would encourage us not to think so much international speech value, call to action. You have to take a lesson. It's from my child or somebody that passed away or some life transforming event, right? Just try to pick something that's engaging the audience, that people can understand. And that's what I took away from the judging criteria.
Yeah, great. Thank you for clarifying that. So let's move on. We're going to start looking at how to structure this thing. Like every other speech, there's a beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end. And what we're going to look at now is some ideas for if you've got a pen and a piece of paper, or if you want to start typing this onto a computer, whichever way you'd like to start thinking about this. We're going to start taking you through your individual tall tales. So as you can see down at the bottom here, is that it could have a spark of truth. I took a stand-up comedy class here in Atlanta. Have you ever heard of a gentleman by the name of Jeff Justice? Have you ever heard that gentleman's name? Well, one of the things that I learned from that, a couple of things I learned from that, well, I should say a lot of things, but two things I'd like to share here are, number one is that it can start with just a grain of truth. There's also that the story can also be, several stories can all be melded in together. Certainly exaggeration is encouraged here. Another thing about writing comedy, and I would think would also fall in here, would be appropriate, and that would be everything happened recently. The more recent it is, the more relevant it seems. Well, 5 years ago, when I took a boat trip, versus last week, my wife and I went on a cruise. So making it more current makes it more relevant. So those are two takeaways that I'd like to stress, would be keeping it the timeline relevant to now, and also feeling free to exaggerate and to meld several stories in with each other. So what kind of things can we look at is going to be part of that introduction? You want to start with something that's going to be relatable to your audience. It's here it could be something, an everyday scenario. Let's start with that. We're going to start simple. After I got to stop saying and so. Those are my two catchphrases. We're going to build a foundation. And in this case, it's a foundation on how to create a tall tale story. Now, after the foundation is built and it gets stronger and stronger and stronger, then you can start putting different things on top of it. But I want to share with you this process. And the first is starting with something that's mundane. I went to the dentist. I went to work. I brushed my teeth. Finding something that's just a simple task of some sort. I turned on the computer. The objective here is also to engage the audience with a very simple, everyday scenario that they will relate to. You can see some of them on here. Went shopping. I went to the store and bought my wife a cake. All right. So that's starting. That's the opening, making it relatable. From there, we're going to go to, now we start adding that wild extravaganza in here. But we don't want to go too far too fast. For example, while I was getting ready for tonight's presentation, at about 2 hours before we were going to start, I can feel this something in the air, and as I was getting ready to sit down and talk to my wife, I heard this banging, almost like pounding on the door. And so certainly that got me up, and I went to the door and I opened the door and I see this giant. There's this giant standing in front of me. It's about at least 12 feet. Breath just smelled like a dumpster. It was hot and burning, singeing the hairs on my beard. And when I looked into his eyes, I knew exactly who he was. He was fear. That guy that shows up every time you got to make a speech, or at least that guy that shows up when I need to make a speech. Fear. So here, an example of just building up to it without giving it away too fast. I brushed my teeth. I looked maybe some colors around the room. What was the day like? Was the sun shining in? Starting off normal, maybe not using that term, but giving that normalcy of things for a bit, and then building up into it. Okay. So that wild, gradually increasing the absurdity. Thinking about also at this point, thinking about key words. What are some words you want to incorporate into your presentation? The funnier, the better. And then, of course, we want to end this thing with some sort of a twist. Now, this is also my verbiage, lesson learned. It's not on the sheet, but that's coming from me. If there is a lesson learned at the end, great. If there isn't a lesson learned, but, whatever that ending is, it's got to be memorable. A pun, a quote, something that's going to wrap it all up. So here we went through the 3 pieces of creating a beginning. It's something relatable. Keep it simple right now. You can start building on it. And also, we're going to have some folks. Now, we're here for an hour and a half today. Is that right, Chad? Yes, I see Fran shaking her head. Thumbs up. Thank you. So we're going to go into breakout rooms in just a moment, and there's going to be at least 3 in each breakout room. And what I'd like you to do is put on your creativity hats and come up with that beginning, that relatable beginning, something simple. Go wacky, whatever you want to do at this point. Nothing's wrong. There are no wrong responses here. Nothing. Start building that. Remember, start gradually. Don't give it away too fast. Keep that audience leaning in, leaning in. What's going to happen next? Who's he talking about? Who's at the door? Oh my God, the giant's at the door. Something that's going to build up to that. And then think about how you're going to wrap it up. Don't worry about having to have a complete speech at this point. When we come back, if you'd like to share with us, we will do 1 to 2 minutes, and we'll have a timer. Chad will be the timer. In the actual contest, it's 3 to 5, but we just don't have the time for you to, number one, well, maybe you do have the time to create a 3 to 5, but we don't have the time for enough folks to go through that much time. All right. What questions do you have about this exercise? So again, come up with a simple question of some sort, a simple, mundane something of some sort to begin it, begin the story, then start exaggerating on it, and think about how you're going to conclude this thing. Don't see any questions, Chad, so let's go ahead, and you're going to be heading into the breakout rooms.
You got it. Thank you, David. So we're going to click the button and you will all be automatically whisked away to your breakout rooms. We're putting 15 minutes on the clock for you to build your short little 1 to 2 minute speeches. So here we go. We're opening up the rooms and we'll see you again in just a few minutes.
All right.
All right.
Hey, Yolanda, you're doing a great job, David.
Thank you. All right.
Hi, I'm on my phone. I'm getting ready to pop off of my phone, and now I'm on a computer so I can show my face.
Welcome, everybody. We are pulling everybody back from the breakout rooms. So we got about another 30 seconds or so, and the full cohort will be here with us. I hope you were able to put together some beautiful, wonderful, outlandish, unbelievable stories.
All right. We're still waiting for some additional folks to come back.
We got about 10 seconds here, David.
Okay.
Folks are coming. Folks are coming.
Okay.
All right. You're a go, David.
All right. We've got everybody back. So was that productive for you? I see a lot of folks with their shaking their heads up and down. So just a quick reminder of what we've just gone through is, like all speeches, they have an introduction, there's a body, and there's a conclusion. And what we were looking for was some sort of an opening that would be relevant to your audience, and then slowly start building on that to some sort of a conclusion at the end of your story. So I know we've just kind of scratched the surface here, but I'd like to see if anyone would like to share their speech. Lana, look at that. I didn't even have the words finished coming out of my mouth, and you had already raised your hand. Look at that.
We had a fantastic team who gave great participation. I did take some notes. So here we go.
Well, hold on. I want to make sure Chad is ready with as the timer. So make sure you see if you
Oh,
could
it won't
raise
be
your
more
hand,
than a
Chad.
minute. I can assure you.
Well, we'll try to keep it to the 1 to 2 minutes because we are short on
Trust me,
time.
it definitely will be that. So
Okay.
last week I went to Kroger and I saw an elderly lady with a walker and her dog. The dog was called Spot. Now the dog was sitting in the walker rather than the elderly lady. What's up with that? And the lady was pushing the dog in the walker versus the other way round. Now, the dog is a service dog, so maybe he's got a pass on that. The woman's visually impaired, and they ended up at a seafood place. Next thing we know, Spot found a crab that had 9 legs. And they said, well, you've got an excuse for that. It's a service dog. See? Food.
Oh, I like that. Seafood. Very nice. Very good. Please, everybody. Yes, yes. Very nice. Now, because it's short, there's certainly opportunities for more. So I would say number one and would be how did that make you feel by seeing that dog pushing the carriage versus and the lady sitting in the carriage. So getting more of the feeling in there. And also an opportunity to talk a little bit more about the dog, what it looked like, what color was it, what kind of dog was it, painting that picture a little bit more for us versus just dog. And the crab, 9 legs. How did that make you feel that you're looking at a crab with 9 legs? And you throw in different colors. Maybe the crab was smoking a cigarette, was reading a book or something. You know, it could go in a variety of directions, but great start, Lana. Great start. Who else would like to demonstrate what they put together? Let's see. Did I miss anybody's hand? I guess not. Okay. What questions did you come back? What questions do you have? Let's take a look at the chat. Great job. Oh, there was a question
in the chat about props. Are props
Yes.
okay?
Yes, props are okay. I did see that written in the on the judge's ballot. Props are okay. Well, what I'd like to do is
I was
to
gonna.
go ahead.
So one comment is when you started your story on the monster at the door.
Yes.
One direction to take that after the introduction and the explanation is it's a sort of a normal neighborly conversation. You say, "Hey, Bernie." It's
Yeah.
like, "Hey, Chaz." Like, "Rough night?" "Yeah." "Lock yourself out of your house again?" "Yeah." "Want some coffee?" "Sure." "What'd you do?" Go through the whole conversation. It's like, Bernie, we could just put a rock outside and put your key in it, and your big woolly monster says, "I always worry about somebody breaking into my house."
Yeah.
So don't judge a book by a cover kind of storyline. That you can take those in some really good directions. The other thing is we talked about the fact that you can take a mundane thing and explain how it works. So you could talk about how cats really do run the internet. And the reason your internet goes down is you said something bad about a cat in a chat room.
Yeah. Or the hamster wheel. You piss off
Exactly.
a hamster and he's not going to go around that wheel anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up, Richard. Thank you so much. Yeah, it could be. Yeah, we've got this. My neighbor next door. He's a giant. He's that. Well, in my case, it would be fear. He's living right next door to me. He's that close. And we were just with him last week and had a barbecue. We were in the pool together. Yeah.
Exactly.
Great. Thank you. All right. Any additional questions or comments? What nuggets of information are you taking away from today? What surprised you about this?
Linda shared that from the recording that you shared with us earlier from the gentleman from District 50, wherever he was.
Two.
52. Correct me, Elise, or that it wasn't an impact. Linda, would you like to embellish?
Who was that? Lana, did we lose you?
They're finishing. So listen to this.
Okay, am I unmuted now?
Oh, Linda, yes, go ahead.
Yes. I was sharing that I enjoyed the presentation from District 52, but I thought it lacked just a little flavor at the end where it says give yourself a hand. There could have been a pun or something twist before that. And I said something crazy like, now cut your hand off and give it to someone else. And give yourself a hand, something like that. Just a little something different.
Sure. I agree and I'm glad you saw that and thinking about those kind of things and making sure that your own speech has that impact. Yeah, I felt that I love the speech. I felt that the ending was a little flat, that there could have been a little more something at the end. Yes. It's harder to craft. Go ahead, Linda.
But also, Lana had said when I shared, if they gave us something, like, well, what can you do with your hands? Something like that. Lana was saying that is really not required.
Yeah.
That part of
it's exactly. It's not required. However, yes, you want to find an impactful ending of some sort. And we had that discussion earlier. If it's a lesson learned, if it's a quote, if it's something, it's got to be something at the end. So yes. So thank you, Linda, for that. I wanted to share one more video with you and to give you another good example of a presentation. So you should be able to see my screen. Let me go ahead and start it.
Diane Windingland. Perfect. Just perfect. Perfect. Just perfect. Diane Windingland.
It was October 1st, 2007, a postcard perfect fall day. The sky was a bright blue, the trees were ablaze with color, and the grass didn't need to be mowed. Perfect. Just perfect. And I was in my garage, about to do something I never thought I would do. I had all the equipment set up, the postal scale, 4 Ziploc baggies, a spoon, and a 4.5-pound bag of a powdery substance. As I divided from the larger bag into the smaller baggies, my next door neighbors walked by and peered in. Nosy neighbors. Perfect. Just perfect. I gave them the Minnesota head nod. You know, the greeting you give people you don't really want to talk to. Well, I should have closed the garage door because just a few minutes later, a squad car came by very slowly. I closed the garage door, but it was too late. There was a pounding on the door. I opened it up and there were 2 cops there standing with their hands on their weapons. Ma'am, what's in the baggies? Oh, it's not what you think. Really, it's not. Just then, a small voice came from inside the house. Mom, are you done with the angel dust yet? Perfect, just perfect. At that moment, I very much regretted telling my daughter that her grandmother's ashes were angel dust. Oh, yeah, it made sense at the time. Grandma's in heaven with the angels. This is her angel dust. Well, the cops just nodded to each other in that cop way they do. And the next thing I knew, I was in the back of the squad car with my hands cuffed behind me. And then I saw one of the cops take my mother's ashes and stick what looked like a little straw into it and put some of it on this little device. Oh yeah, it was a drug-filled test kit. Oh, this ordeal would soon be over. No, it wasn't. The cop turned to me and said, "Ma'am, you're going to have to come to the station with us. It tested positive." What? A false positive, maybe? Had the funeral home workers contaminated my mother's ashes? Had my mother had one too many poppy seed muffins? I could just see my mother up in heaven, looking down at me and laughing. She had quite the wry sense of humor. In fact, when we were talking about cremation versus burial, she decided on cremation because she said it would be her last chance for a smoking hot body. Yeah, I had that kind of mother. Well, to make a long story short, at the station, they retested my mother's ashes. Of course, they were not positive for drugs. And they let me and my mother's ashes go. And I realized that someday I would have a great story to tell. Perfect. Just perfect.
So there's just one more example. I like how she brings the perfect, just perfect, both at the beginning and also bringing it back at the end. So what are your thoughts? What are your takeaways from today? You can put it in the chat if you'd like. So let me have a call to action to you. And my call to action to you is for you to challenge you to create a tall tale and to present it within the next couple of meetings. Challenge yourself to do it. And here at Toastmasters, it's one of the best places to experiment and to fail and to succeed because you're surrounded by all kinds of people that want you to be successful. So the safest place in the world to do this is at a Toastmasters meeting. So I challenge you to put together a tall tale and be
So Dave,
open to, yeah,
oh,
go ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead, Linda.
Dave, this is Linda. I'm having problems with my mute and unmute, but I did want to thank you because I've never participated in a Tall Tales and I'm excited about participating in the Tall Tales contest. But what you gave today gave me some comfortability. I know that it's 3 to 5 minutes, how to open the body, and just made me more relaxed in preparing my presentation. So thank you.
Thank you, Linda. So something else, I'm glad you said that, Linda, because one of the other places that you can start experimenting with a tall tale is during table topics. Table topics is all 100% can be made up. So create that tall tale. Visualize the giant, the starting from the mundane and going to the crazy. Start experimenting and going into those places in your mind where all that creativity is. And one of the places to start working on that is with table topics. Yanni, I see, and I hope I'm saying your name correctly. I see your hand is up.
You have, David. My comment was what I was trying to share because one of my club members actually asked me this question. She is pretty new with the Toastmasters. She is interested to join being a contestant and like to practice in a club multiple times before going on the contest. Of course, that is always welcome. And my answer to her when she asked this question, hopefully I can also share with everyone here and hopefully got a blessing from you, is can I apply this to the project that I'm working on the pathway? My answer was yes, as long as you can find a project that is suitable for in pathway for your topic. Yes, 5 to 7 minutes. I know most of the project, it is the length, but as long as they do 3 to 5, closer to 5, they still qualified for the project because the minimum is 4 minutes and 30 seconds for the 5 to
Good.
7 minutes project.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you for that. I also wanted to include that. Well, now I forgot it. So I
No
don't know.
free speeches.
No free speeches. Okay, good. Yes, thank you, Linda. Um, I apologize. I don't remember what I had on my mind, but let's take a quick look. We've got only a couple of moments left. Indeed, the audience will get a great evening, very informative advice from gradually building. Start with something mundane, use words that dress it up. Yes, and one of the things that I hope you noticed from the young lady who gave this presentation was adding a little bit of that color in there, a little bit more flavor in there, thinking about smells and sounds and colors and turning to the left and turning to the right and observations that you see. What do things feel like? How do things make you feel? Using rhetorical questions as well. How would you feel if a giant was standing at your door? How would you feel if your giant was living next door to you and came over and asked for a cup of sugar? So it could be looking at those different rhetorical questions. So that's all the information I have. I hope you all enjoyed today. Thank you so much. And again, challenge you to get out there and just keep speaking. Keep speaking. Thank you, Chad, for your help.
You bet.
Yolanda,
Thanks,
thank
everybody.
you.
Good night. Let's
Thank
give
you
a round
all.
of applause for David. Thank you, David.
Thank
you so
you.
much. You bet.
Thank you.
All right.
We hope to
Bye-bye.
see you on our next trainings. Check out the comments for the training schedule.
We good?